For more than 3 years, the world has been watching what can only be described as a high-stakes geopolitical gamble. At the center of it stood a single promise, the idea that Ukraine could one day step through the door of NATO. That door was presented as salvation, as protection, as the ultimate justification for sacrifice and endurance. Through the lens of Kiev's leadership, it became the moral engine of the entire conflict, the reason suffering could be endured and losses framed as meaningful. Yet after years of relentless fighting, that door never opened. It remained sealed, not by Moscow alone, but by the very hands that once gestured for Ukraine to walk forward. Welcome to Political Plot, where we cut through the noise to reveal the power plays shaping American politics. Today we are diving into how Ukraine's abandoned NATO dream exposes the brutal reality of great power politics, where promises are conditional, alliances are transactional, and smaller nations often become expendable pieces in larger strategic games. At its core, this is a story about the collapse of illusion, the cost of outsourcing sovereignty, and what happens when geopolitical reality finally overrides rhetoric. When President Volodymyr Zelensky publicly acknowledged that Ukraine was willing to abandon its NATO ambition in exchange for peace, it was not a routine diplomatic concession. It was the sound of an entire strategic narrative collapsing. In that moment, the polished language of Western reassurance peeled away, revealing a far harsher reality underneath. Ukraine had not been marching toward membership. It had been positioned as a forward operating buffer, a testing ground for pressure tactics, weapon systems, and resolve. The admission was not merely about peace talks. It marked the symbolic death of the broader eastward expansion vision that had defined Western strategy for decades. Ukraine's position has shifted dramatically. Once praised as a beacon of democratic resistance, it is now forced to dismantle the very monuments it built to sustain morale. Russia continues to hold significant territory, not just as land, but as a strategic buffer that fulfills its primary security objective. Meanwhile, Ukraine and its Western backers struggle to redefine the meaning of victory in a way that conceals an uncomfortable truth. This is not flexibility. It is the collapse of a long-planned strategy designed to constrain Russia's influence. Why did this reversal occur? The answer lies in material power, not rhetoric. Western planners underestimated Russia's capacity for endurance and overestimated their own ability to impose decisive costs. From the outset, Moscow drew a clear boundary regarding NATO's presence near its borders. That boundary was dismissed as paranoia. Years later, the battlefield has demonstrated that Russia was not bluffing. Despite sweeping sanctions, its economy adapted into a wartime footing that proved resilient. Ukraine's abandonment of NATO aspirations is therefore an acknowledgement that Russia achieved its most important strategic objective. Resources reveal even more. Western investment in Ukraine was never driven by charity alone. Beneath Ukrainian soil lie vast reserves of critical materials, from lithium to coal, iron ore, and some of the most fertile agricultural land on the continent. These assets functioned as collateral for military support, yet the irony is brutal. The region's richest in industrial and mineral value now lie largely under Russian control. The Donbass is not just territory, it is economic leverage. Strategic waterways are not merely geographic features, they are trade arteries. What remains under Western influence is a country burdened by debt, shattered infrastructure, and limited economic upside. Continued funding became less an investment and more a liability. Maintaining a vast administrative state and sustaining military operations without access to the most valuable assets made the cost calculus unsustainable. When benefit disappears, capital withdraws. This is not morality, it is arithmetic. Western fatigue compounded the issue. Collective defense rhetoric gave way to the reality that direct confrontation with a nuclear power was never truly on the table. The security umbrella collapsed the moment escalation risks became real. Promises functioned as incentives, not guarantees. As stockpiles thinned, energy prices surged, and domestic voters grew impatient. Idealism was replaced by cold pragmatism. Ukraine was forced to confront its true status, not a future member of an elite club, but a damaged gatekeeper left holding the line alone. Financially, the situation is even starker. Aid largely took the form of loans and debt instruments. Ukraine's fiscal sovereignty eroded as obligations accumulated. Major investment firms and creditors acquired significant stakes in future reconstruction, energy systems, and agricultural land. This is not hypothetical. It is a documented process of asset conversion. Pressuring Kyiv toward elections and policy reversals aligns with a restructuring phase, one that requires new leadership capable of signing signing binding agreements that formalize asset transfers. From this perspective, abandoning NATO and reshuffling leadership are not isolated acts. They are components of liquidation. Zelensky's uncompromising wartime image became an obstacle to negotiated exits and debt consolidation. A more compliant administrator is easier to work with. Russia may have secured military leverage, but Western actors are determined not to leave empty-handed. What remains of Ukraine risks becoming an economic dependency, where future labor and resources service debts incurred during war. The decision to push for elections amid ongoing conflict introduces further instability. Millions lack reliable power, bombs still fall, and yet political competition is reintroduced. This is not democratic renewal. It is strategic disruption. Internal division weakens resolve and benefits Moscow, which can observe as its adversary fractures from within. The cruelty lies in the willingness to sacrifice allied stability for the sake of strategic disengagement. Zooming out, Ukraine's experience exposes a broader collapse of trust in Western security guarantees. Bilateral assurances offered now lack the binding force of formal alliances. They resemble symbolic gestures rather than enforceable commitments. The pattern is familiar. Afghanistan was abandoned abruptly. Ukraine faces a slower, more polished version of the same retreat. Allies worldwide are watching and drawing conclusions. Being an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but being its proxy can be fatal. Russia, by contrast, has demonstrated the leverage of sovereign resolve. By resisting a system led by Washington and steadily advancing its objectives, it has reshaped perceptions of power. Its success is not measured solely in territory, but in halting NATO's momentum. This outcome emboldens other states to reconsider dependence on Western frameworks. A multipolar order accelerates as confidence in unilateral dominance erodes. What remains is a devastated country, divided land, and a psychological scar formed by betrayal. Russia advances toward concluding the conflict from a position of strength, having redrawn Europe's security map through force and persistence. The lesson for the world is harsh, but unavoidable. Sovereignty cannot be outsourced. Promises without enforcement are liabilities. No nation should allow itself to become a stage for proxy wars, because when the lights go out and the supply planes stop landing, only the people remain to absorb the cost. This truth is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Only by confronting it directly can nations truly understand the value of independence and the danger of trading it for comforting words.